Hi everyone, Christina Werner here. Welcome to another video for SSSstamp.com. Today I'm going to be using the stamp set included in the March 2023 card kit from Simon. This is the Happy Hello stamp set. This is one that I designed and I love the look of all this folksy, just flowers and birds and things like that. I think it's really, really pretty. So I'm going to walk you through the creation of 3 cards today, all with just stamping. These are all pretty much one layer cards. There is one card that has a popped up sentiment, but for the most part, it's all very, very simple stamping. And along the way, I'm going to be sharing with you some tips and tricks on getting very precise, clean card designs, especially when it comes to just stamped cards. For cards that are like this, that are mostly one layer, it really pays off in the end to take your time and be really precise with all of your spacing and just really clean stamping. So for most of these cards, I'm going to be using a grid transparency sheet. You notice that I used that at the beginning. Here I am again. I'm putting it directly over this card front and then using it as a guide for placing all of my stamps onto my project. So I wanted 3 flowers on this card. And so I started with the center flower first. And I did the stems for that flower and right on the center of my card. This transparency grid that's from Simon is so fantastic because it has the center marked for you so you know exactly where to place your stamps. So I first used Steel Blue and now I'm using Sunshine. And I'm going to be using these inks from Simon Says Stamp. This is from their original ink line. And these inks are really, really great for really simple stamping because they dry back to a really solid, smooth finish. Now, right here, they're looking a little bit splotchy, but you can even tell on the blue stem that it's starting to smooth out. So these colors, when they're first stamped, are quite splotchy and a little bit dark, actually. But as they dry back into the paper, they spread out, they smooth, and they also dry back just a little bit lighter than the color they're originally, that they look when you first stamp them. So I'm using burnt orange and also wisteria. And for most of these, I did stamp them twice just to make sure I had a really good impression. So I'm going to add one more flower over here on the top here with that steel blue shade, and then another smaller mini flower to fill in that gap between the middle and right flower. So I have my flowers stamped, so I'm going to work on the greeting now. The other thing that this transparency grid sheet is great for is that it gives you some lines to orient your greetings if you want them to be exactly horizontal and perfectly straight on your card. It's such a great tool and it's super inexpensive as well. So if you don't have a transparency grid sheet, I highly recommend you pick one up. I use it all the time, especially for cards like this. So here's my very first card, all finished and stamped. I used the color Slate for the greeting, and I love how this one turned out. All of the cards that I'm creating in this video would be great duplicate cards or lots of cards made all at once because you could just stamp them in your MISTI. Now, between cards, and also if you're just going to be switching colors on stamps, it's especially nice to clean off your stamps. This ink type in particular tends to really stick on your stamps. That's why you get a really solid impression and it works really well. These are also permanent and waterproof once they're dry. So the ink really tends to stick around on those stamps. And if you don't clean them really well in between stampings, you can have kind of color mixing on the stamp. And for my second card, I started stamping it and then I realized, oh, these colors aren't the true colors. So I decided to do a really thorough cleaning on my stamps. Now for those stamps, I cleaned them with the Ultra Clean Stamp Cleaner from Simon. And to keep it clean, I spray it into a baby wipe it over on my stamps, and then I go over my stamps with a stamp chamois or a clean baby wipe just to get rid of any of that greasy residue. For this long border stamp, you may have noticed as I was talking, I used a ruler just to like butt up against that stamp and get it completely straight within my MISTI. That's another really great tip. If you've got really long stamps or maybe even borders or long sentiments that don't tend to stay all in one line, it's hard to get it on your MISTI or even on acrylic block really straight. Use a ruler and then apply it to the door of the MISTI or your acrylic block. That's another great tip. Right here, I stamped the yellow border and then I slid my card over and stamped the red border. That's a great way to keep it straight on the MISTI but not have to remove the stamp and move it to another spot. For my grading, I used the grid transparency sheet and that same slate ink color. It's a really great color for sentiments, I think, especially when you don't want a really, really stark black grading, but you do want it to have a lot of contrast. This is one reason right here. This is an example of why it's great to use a MISTI for this because um, even though most of them that I've been stamping, it looks pretty good on the first stamp, and I'm really just stamping it a multiple time to even out the ink coverage. The first time I stamped that grading, I did not press down on my stamp enough, and it did not transfer the full grading. So it was very fortunate that I was using a MISTI for this. For this next kind of flower, I realized that the stems that are included in this stamp set wouldn't really give me the tall flower that I was hoping for this card design. I wanted to have a taller flower right up next to those borders. So I'm actually going to stamp two of the leaf and stem images right on top of each other. And in order to get them lined up just perfectly, I had the stem directly on one of the lines on the transparency grid sheet. And that allows me to make sure that I line up the other leaf and stem stamp directly above the first and have it be in the perfect position. This is a really great kind of method for extending the use of your stamp. And once again, if you wanted to do multiples of this card design, you absolutely could. Just after each image is stamped, just take that card out and put a new blank card in and do everything in steps. And you'll be able to have many, many cards all at once and minimize the amount of work. So I moved on to the other stem and the first flower. And just with sunshine, I'm using the same exact ink colors that I used before. I'm going to make this a purple flower right here. And that finishes my second card. Super, super easy and quick. I think it looks great. And I'm going to show you the two cards side by side because the first card has dried back completely at this point. So the colors have faded back and they're not splotchy at all. And you can kind of see the difference in color, how there's just a slight shade difference once it's dry. I think it looks really, really neat. So for my third card, I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to use the large kind of heart bird stamp from the stamp set. And I'm going to make this a monochromatic card. So I'm using some lavender cardstock and Wisteria ink. And each time I stamp this image, I'm going to stamp it multiple times to get a really solid impression. And then I'll clean it, and then I'm moving it to a different section. And my goal for this one was I wanted to create a full background design using this one stamp image and a couple other little mini images from the stamp set. I wanted to fill it out like a complete background. So I'm rotating the cardstock, moving it around. I'm even rotating my MISTI in some cases in order to have the best, positioning for my stamp. And I'm trying to fill in all the gaps. Now, heart shapes like this really lend themselves to kind of nestle up into each other. And I think it looks really, really great. But you'll notice that I do have some kind of larger gaps right there. So I'm going to take that small flower stamp and just fill in those gaps. And this is going to give me a kind of a different look down on that corner, not corner, but the center bottom of the card. And I really love how this turned out. So I'm going to fill in the rest of the gaps with this little tiny flower stamp just on the sides. And then I'm going to bring in the large bird heart image, and I'll fill in the two gaps on the either side of the top portion of the card. And after stamping this background and the stamp and rotating it around and moving it around, I think I kind of want a background stamp that is a similar look to this. So if you would like a background stamp like that, let us know in the comments down below. Um, since I designed this stamp set, I think it'd be really fun to have a background stamp of a similar style. I think it'd be really fun. So I'm finishing up this background, kind of rotating, moving things around from side to side, making sure that everything's nestled in. And then I'll be finishing the background. Now, I didn't want to cover up a ton of this background, so I decided to keep it very, very simple. And I'm only going to do one little greeting for this background. And I wanted to preserve most of the area around that I've stamped, but I did want to use this sending you a happy hello greeting. I'm stamping this on some white cardstock. This is just Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 110-pound cardstock, same white cardstock that I used for my previous cards. And I'm stamping my greeting. I think I stamped it 3 times in Wisteria ink just to make sure it was nice and solid with a really good impression. I then trimmed down the greeting so that it was, almost square. And I used my mini trimmer from Tim Holtz and Tonic. I love this really tiny trimmer. It's great for uses like this where you're cutting a very, very small piece of cardstock. It turned out great. So I'm just going to rotate this, kind of even it up and make sure that it's more even on each side around my greeting. And then I'm going to adhere my stamped panel to my card front. I'm using some Tombow Extreme adhesive for this. And I like to start from kind of like one corner or one side of the card and then press it down. Now, I'm sure you have had instances like this if you're a card maker where your card front does not match up with your card base perfectly. So that happened to me this time. So I just used my T-square ruler from Simon and a craft knife to clean up that card. I then put some foam tape from Simon on the back of my greeting and peeled off the release paper and then pressed it down onto my card. And I decided to put it kind of in the center, a little more near the top, and that finishes my 3rd card. So here are all 3 cards using the stamp set included in the March 2023 card kit. You can pick up all the supplies that I've used today over at SSSstamp.com, including the card kit, or you can actually buy pieces or elements of the kit if you don't want the entire kit itself. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you guys in another video very, very soon.